Yeah, we're live, 7:29, a little bit late, but better late than never. That's what they say. Hope you guys are doing well. Tonight we're going to talk about the thumbnail that I have up is actually a cam retaining plate from the L33 5.3 liter that I have been using for a long time now. Probably, I'm certain more than a year now because we've run a lot of tests on it. But along the way, as I said, if you look really closely in the thumbnail, you'll see there are actually strip threads sitting right behind it that were pulled out. So when I pulled the bolt out, the threads came with it and we set them there. So this is a cam retaining plate. But the important part about this is the missing O-ring in the cam retaining plate. Now, I've run lots and lots of very, very high mileage LS motors from the wrecking yard. And I have never seen a bad O-ring seal. I've seen some that seemed like they were pretty flat, probably got pretty hot, were in there for a long time, probably the original ones. But I had never seen I'd never seen any do this. I'd never seen any actually be damaged with pieces of them missing. And so when I saw this happen, I'm like, wow, that's literally the first time. I didn't realize that. But then when I saw it again, I'm like, okay, and in the same spot is really the thing. So I'm thinking there's definitely a pattern here. So we need to take a look at this. And the thing was that I didn't have enough bolts securing this cam retaining plate. And so it allowed it to move out. And then that's a lot of surface area. There's a lot of oil pressure there. The oil pressure basically slid in that direction and grabbed chunks of the O-ring seal and pulled it out with it. And I'm thinking, since I didn't find them outside the motor, they're probably still inside the motor. I'm going to find those the first time I take or the next time I take the oil pan off. They're probably going to be drawn up into what normally happens is if they're floating around in the oil and doing as many runs as we do, normally they get drawn up against the screen in the pickup. They're not hurting anything. I mean, eventually, if you get a bunch of them in there, they would definitely restrict the flow. But a few of them, honestly, it's not that bad. They're not going to get in the way of anything. You don't want those getting into let's say a lifter. I mean, most of the oil passages are fairly big. You don't want them clogging an oil passage. The lifter would be my biggest thing, and the odds of them getting in there. Like I said, I'm sure where it is, if it got pushed out, it's in the front cover area. Probably went down into the pan, given the amount of oil that's running off of there. I kind of would like to do a video on that without that front cover on there and show what's going on, show all the chaos that's happening there. But I'm sure it dropped down into the pan. If it's not floating in the pan or at the bottom of the pan, probably got picked up by the wind. It probably got picked up by the oil pump screen. A lot of times they'll just stay in there because there's a lot of draw there. They'll just get wedged into the pump screens. They could get drawn into the pump. More than likely, something like that material probably would just get chewed up and spit back out. So hopefully I find those. I find out a little bit. But as I said, I've never had that happen to me before. And I've run motors that have certainly at least 250,000 miles, I'm sure. And I'm pretty certain that these were the original parts on them. So that sort of thing, not common. Oh, excuse me. Today was an early day. I left at 4:00 from West Tech. So it was pretty early. So it's not common at all. And because it happened twice, we obviously, it gives us an area to look at. And we kind of knew what was happening. But I thought it was interesting. And the other thing that's interesting is I have lots of gasket sets and none of them have that O-ring seal on them. I think you might have to get the whole plate. And somebody let me know in the comments if that's the case, if that seal is available all by itself. Because quite honestly, the plate, certainly not there anyway, that plate is not going to get worn out. And if you can put a new seal in there, it would work fine. The only thing on those cam retaining plates that gets worn out is you might get some wear on the front side and the back side of that thing where it's, where stuff is spinning on either the cam gear or the cam itself. And so there might be some wear on there, but I've not seen a ton. We've seen some, there's definitely patterns there, but not where I wouldn't use it, especially if it had a good seal in it. If it doesn't have a good seal in it, then you'll see that it will manifest itself in definitely a change in oil pressure, which that's exactly what it did on this combination. And now you can see why, because it's not just that we thought first that with only a single bolt really holding it, that the plate was basically moving away from the surface of the block and allowing oil to, passage through. That would have been really cool to see if we would have been able to look in there. But what was probably happening is it was moving out a little bit on one side, and then all the oil was shooting out, high pressure oil. And the O-ring is like, yeah, we're not designed to seal that kind of stuff. We're designed to have the metal doing most of the sealing and us be doing just a tiny little bit. But these are the things you find out when you're doing this kind of testing, and when you make a mistake and strip some of all of the threads out of 3 of them. So not good. The one thing that was nice is stripping all the threads out is it made it actually fairly easy to drill the holes for the new Easy Out. Oh, excuse me. It is good to be back home. Good to see my wife, my boys, and the puppies we were playing with today, and they're still puppies, so that's good. That usually they're only there, being puppies for what seems like about 10 minutes. I that's what I told my boys and my wife when I first brought our other dogs home. I'm like, make sure you play with them right now, because you look back at this a couple of weeks will go by in the blink of an eye, and all of a sudden there'll be these lanky teenager dogs, and they're still awesome and they're still adorable, but they won't be puppies anymore. I said, so enjoy this time while they're puppies. And that's what we're doing now. So it's kind of awesome. I'm very excited about doing the turbo stuff on the 2.2 liter Dodge, but I have to say that, I want to run the stock turbo. I want to run it. I'm very excited about running it because it came non-intercooled, which is what the motor was in my car. My car shared a very similar motor to this 84 motor, but mine was an 85. I'm very excited about running that non-intercooled motor and then upgrading with an intercooler. I know that doesn't sound like it's very exciting, but for me, boosted stuff is awesome, especially as I always try to do. You run it NA first, and then you run it boosted and go, oh, so it did this much. So now we do with an intercooler, and it did this much. And then we do more timing because of the intercooler. We do this much. And then we do 85. It does this much. And then we do more timing. It does this much. What I want to do, and I was talking to the guys from the car farm, I'm like, this is actually looking pretty good. My goal was that I hope, and I did a little bit of math on what these motors are rated at and what they kind of make when we run them, because it's different. We don't have all the things on it. We run them colder, all that stuff, and open exhaust and open air intake, open throttle body in this case. What I was hoping that is with a turbo, with the factory turbo, but with an intercooler, because my motor is originally rated at 146. What I figured is that run on the dyno the way that we run it, I'm thinking that that's got to be, 170 or so, something like that. 170 probably. 160, 170. And then I'm hoping with E85 and an intercooler and more timing, and maybe, the intake manifold would be a big difference between the early 85 non-intercooled one, because it has that log exhaust manifold, which they kind of share, but it also has a log intake manifold, which is not good. So I'm excited about testing the log intake manifold, even NA. So I just want to get this thing so that it's all situated so we can control the timing, and we would just want the airfield, this thing to be optimized. I also kind of want to figure out, and you'll see this in the video, why the heck does it have this big jump in power toward the end of the RPM range? I want it to be, normally the curves are nice and smooth. So I want it to be that. But if this thing is making 120, 130 horsepower NA the way that we run it, good things can kind of happen, especially since this thing is such low compression. I figure with playing with the cams and intercooler and all that stuff, that my goal was to make 200 under boost at the factory boost level. And looking at what we're doing now, I kind of think that that's possible, which would be very, very awesome. Anyone see the Steve Morris video today? Twin superchargers. He's already run twin torque storms, and he made a lot of power. And I actually don't. I need to call him because I don't understand how those torque storms, having run those, I don't know, eight or 9 times now. I don't understand how they're supporting the power level that he's talking about. So, but I'm curious to see. I mean, the guy's the real deal, so he knows what's going on. So let's see how you guys are doing. Should I run the gray spring on the Melling oil pump? I don't know which one is the gray one. Well, I need to add ring gap to my 5.3 with 548,000 miles on it. Yeah, you'd be surprised. I mean, I've never taken one apart that's 548,000. But what I can tell you is that when you take apart one of these LS motors, there's almost no bore wear at all. You take an old small block Chevy or like the trophy 4-cylinder they have, small block Chevy, the Fords were a little bit better about this. Big block Chevy, take apart an old school one, there'll be a ridge at the top of the bore where you can't get the piston out because you have to either taper it or ridge ream it and get rid of it because the bore wears so much from the piston and the ring that the bore wears on these LS motors. Even we've only ever tested them with about half that, but there's almost no wear at all. A lot of times you can still see the crosshatch. So the bore's not wearing. So the only thing that's going to wear that are the rings. My guess is the rings are not going to wear out. My guess is that they would probably lose tension. So it might be that if you check the ring gap on those, we don't know what it was to begin with, but if you check the ring gap on them, you're not going to have 28,000s. A lot of those are in the teens. Can an LQ9 piston be used in LQ4? Yes, the LQ9 is probably going to be a Gen 4. So an LQ9 piston and rod, which you could use, is going to need to be rebalanced with the LQ4 crank. Richard, the link I sent you in the comments on your video was an 1880s Dodge Shelby 6.1 Hemi swap. Okay, that's a good one to put in there. It's not front wheel drive anymore, I would guess, right? You, sir, have the best information channel by far. Thank you very much. Was the LS open before? Mine has been open many, many times. At least for cam swaps. We've already put, I don't know, 8 or 10 cams in, I think. Found MSD distributor O-rings. Yeah, I'm familiar with those. Big gobs of RTV and the pickup of the same small block Chevy before. Oil pressure was good. Yeah, they run good. You can put a lot of stuff in there, and as long as it doesn't get clogged up in some very small oil orifice that's restricting flow somewhere that would cause something to wear out, it's all good. I have dropped on my Mustang. I dropped an oil pump, the drive shaft, and that stayed in the pan for a little while. We put another one in from the top. I just siliconed it to the distributor and stuck the distributor in. Not what I recommend because it's easier for them to fall out, which we did before. What are you going to do, or when are you going to do some FEs on the dyno? I don't have any FEs. Might have access to one, but so I'd have to get that. Have you ever built a Japanese 386, an RB25? I own an RB24, and I'm going to run that on the dyno. I haven't run a 2J only because they're real money. What's your opinion on the rumor that GM hones the cam bearings to size after they're installed in the block? People say that the bearing color showing is normal from the factory. You don't buy it. I don't think that the cam bearing, I don't think that the copper was showing on new GM crate motors, like LS3 crate motors and stuff. I think it was just bearing. I don't remember seeing the copper on those. So I don't know that that's true. Had an 84 and 85 T1. Yep. Bots, love your videos. I see people porting the Dorman LS intake manifolds. Does smoothing the plastic intake help much? Maybe someone will send you a ported Dorman truck intake manifold. I have a Dorman truck, so somebody could port that if they wanted to. We could test it. When I tested the Dorman truck, I kind of want to run it again, but when I tested the Dorman truck last time, it didn't even do as well as the factory truck. It was way off of the Trailblazer SS. Isn't there a crank difference between LQ4 and LQ9? Well, what will be different about them is I think the crank is going to be the same, but they're definitely going to have different trigger wheels on them. If you're asking me if it's a ported head on the 2.2, it's all stock right now. I have an O2 LQ4 twin turbos. I lifted the ring lands off the pistons, took it apart, threw in an LQ9 rod and piston, and sent it. It's just as if you hurt the ring lands, more likely than not, you didn't have enough ring gap in it. Could the 2.2 be advancing the cam due to chain slop? What chain is slopping? It has a cam belt on it, not a chain. 200 horsepower at stock boost would be some serious action when boost is finally ramped up. I mean the math. If we make 130 NA, the math puts it there already. So especially because we're not running 85 yet, but we'll see. I mean, or we should be really close. The Gray Spring is 25 over stock. It's 25 over stock LS pressure? That'd be a lot. LQ9 and LQ4 are both Gen 3s. The LQ9 is a Gen 3. Tell me about the LS valve dropping theory. Is it geometry? Is it the seats or is it the guides? Why are they dropping valves in them? Now that I had the exhaust cam changed in my Cruise, did you also do the intake, Jeremy? I'm up to 230 wheel horsepower. That's a lot for a 1.4. Thinking about getting an Ecotech 4-cylinder head from the junkyard to learn how to port. There's lots of heads there that you can learn to port on. Richard RB the Z. Would kind of be the ideal motor for the 240Z. With the RB looks so good in those. Why does Trailblazer SS make 385 horsepower and the GTO and Corvette with the same engine make 400? Is it a LS2? Is it exactly the same? It could be rating. It could be programming. It could be exhaust. Could be intake manifold. What was the RB24 from? What cars? I have an RB25, and they also made an RB20. I don't know about the 24. Using a truck Norris cam with the stock injectors and throttle body need to be upgraded for 100% of everything. The throttle body's fine, but the injectors definitely you need to upgrade. What is too much oil pressure for the LS? We've seen them with high pressure pumps go way over 100 psi, and you don't need that much pressure for these motors. LY6 is a Gen 4 6-liter. It is, but so are lots of other 6-liters. LY6 is not the only one, and the LY6 is a rec port headed one. The LQ9 is a cathedral port. I've no doubt you'll make 200 on the stock boost, but can't stop imagining that system efficiency at even 20 pounds. I don't think that stock turbo is going to be very good at 20 pounds. We'd have to have a much better turbo. And then you get into that stock intercooler. There's no way it's going to be good at 20 pounds. I know guys probably do it, but I would want a much bigger, and we will put an air to water on it and stuff. Valve head separating on the LS7. GM factory TSB says it's out of round guides. Folks offering extended length guides into the port as a remedy. Yeah, Sykes, I agree. The RB just looks sexy. I mean, a twin cam in there, especially with the turbo, they look really good in there. I like an L series too. I like an L28, which I have, which might go in there, but a turbo, a turbo L28. Just picked up a roller 351 Windsor. Is it worth to upgrade the cam now and do heads later in the car? Yeah, although you could go get GT40 heads pretty cheap from the wrecking yard. You could do those. The RB25 I have is not a Neo engine. What injectors would be best for the truck Norris cam? You just need injectors that support your power level. Tony B, getting ready to port up a set of 3800 heads so they can be sent to you for your project. Hope you hear from you soon with project details from Big Dogs. Did JPL send those over to you? But I will get a hold of you though. We will need to have a conversation. Australia, what's up? We were talking about the small things that make a big difference. Like the thumbnail that we have up is the cam retaining plate that I push the seals out of, and it really only takes one thing to ruin a lot of things. Should I worry if smoke is coming out of my catch can on my turbo build? Does it have lots of blow by? Is that the problem? I have Deca 80s in my cars. Those work good. That's what we have in the 2.2 right now. You'll kill a stock turbo rather quickly from overspinning it at the stock intercooler at 20 psi. I'm sure guys do. It'd be interesting to measure the temperature in and out of that stock core. That stock core is not very, I don't think it's big enough, and it probably doesn't flow enough for 20 pounds. RB sound good with the ITBs. They do. They're really good motors. I heard the RB25 Neo is good for 500 horsepower. Are the Neo internals any different? I thought that just had a different turbo on it. One of them has the like ceramic wheel or one of those for the turbo, right? Eric, we'll see you later, man. I do like the RBs. I think they look really good with a fancy cover and it's turbo and stuff and a big intercooler on it. Would you do a 7M GTE on the dyno? I would if I'm sure it's been 20 years since the last time I saw one of those. Neo also has a COP rather than a waste spark. The Neo heads are different. It's an upgrade for most RBs to get the heads in Japan. Does one of them have do they have different buckets on them or something? Is one of them solid and one of them is hydraulic? Richard, is the rest of the Z solid? Yeah, the one that I have is. It's already got a cage in it and stuff. Because it was run at the Silver State a bunch. All the GT40 heads and the GT40 heads in the rec yard that are near me, I've all been taken. An aluminum head would be way better. I was just offering that out there because lots of guys go with the GT40 head because it's cheap. Hey, is the RB25 Turbo a better choice for the 240Z than the L28 Turbo? Let me know what you guys think. Got to get a poll going. We're not going to be here that long, though. LQ9, 706, 459 will flash tune or standalone. You can do either one. The flash tune will do what you need it to do also. What are the valve stem tip protection BTR offers now? For what application is that? For LS9s? Are they lash caps? Caspian, what's your opinion on this cam size? LS7, AFR heads. Are they, does AFR make LS7 heads, or is this a cathedral head, or is it an LS3 head? I don't know. Ported MSD, ported 103. 2-inch headers, cam size is a 237. I'm sure that that's probably either 239 or 249. I think it's underperforming. And this is a 427. That should be enough cam. Most of the guys have bigger cams than that have a 427 LS7. I did. Somebody asked if I flowed the Vizard head. I did, but I didn't flow it. It still had the I think it still had the seals on it, so I don't think I could get all the lift out of it. But I think it was up around 180. I think it's a little more than the Car Farm head is, but not a ton. But it's not showing the same flow numbers that Dave is showing on his bench. So we're trying to get together and figure out what's going on. I heard they were overbuilt. Put a GTX 3076 turbo on it, and you get 500 horsepower. I'd be surprised if that happened because you'd be doubling the power output. But maybe it does. I don't know. What engine would you say would be better for a street car, a Chevy 305 or a Ford 302? Are you have the choice of running either one of those heads in some kind of street rod or something? And I have a video up where we compared the 305 versus the 302. It's not a matter of which engine is better. It's usually whether you're a Chevy guy or a Ford guy. Trailblazer SS makes 395. Yeah, that's probably closer. One of the things I know, I think the Trailblazer SS, if it's a 6-liter, probably doesn't have the LS2 cam in it. Probably has something else. Recal's out. Love to see the RB25. I know I have a bunch of stuff that I want to try on there. Don't understand camshaft timing on double over cams. If you advance or retard the intake cam, do you have to adjust the exhaust cam? No, normally when we do it, we adjust one at a time when we're seeing what works. But the problem is, and which is why it takes a really long time, is that you go through all of the advancing and retards on the intake cam, and then you move the exhaust cam and you go through all of it again. And then you move the exhaust cam and then you do it all again. And then you move you could obviously do it the other way too. But you have to go through sequences, and it's a lot of tests. I mean, it's a lot easier if it's electronic. You could just, but back in the day with the mechanical adjusters, we had to physically move those like on the B series Hondas. 750 horsepower with a stock motor with just boost. That seems like a lot. Offered for all the LS spring kits on BTR. I don't know what that is. Turbine research. Any plans for doing testing with methanol fuel? I don't know what I would test that on. I don't really have anything that could run methanol. I'll ask Brule if they've done any. Maybe on some turbo thing. If all you're doing is a cam, I think the stock injectors would be fine. I know on a truck application, the stock injectors are not big enough to work with the gain that you get from a cam swap. You need to step up to the injectors. CA, I'm going to try to read your thing here. Here we go. During your LS head test, you ran a set of TrickFlow 225s. According to TrickFlow, they list the assembled head as the maximum lift of 600, where you ran a 625 lift cam. Did you put springs in the head? I honestly don't remember. I thought that we ran the springs that came in the head. I'd have to go back and look. That was a lot of years ago. I asked because there's a lot of misinformation on the Summit site. Are you wanting to run something that will take more than 600 lift or something? I mean, can't you put a 650 or a 660 spring in there? Did they have them shimmed? I mean, I'd have to look at the head to kind of answer that. I voted yes, but the RB seems to be fragile, especially the oil pump. Stock 2800 is bulletproof. Yeah. Twin turbo Neo RBs are rated at 300 horsepower stock. 750. A twin turbo Neo RB is not a RB25. That's an RB26. That's a whole different motor. An RB25 makes much less. I'll tell you what to trade it at. $280 horsepower and 268 foot-pounds. And I think all the RB25s are single turbo. Certainly the one I have is. Yeah. Let's see. How do I find the video that you made with intercooler piping and duct tape? What did I make out of intercooler piping and duct tape? This ring gap for a 416 13-to-1 compression. You should look at the ring manufacturer's recommendations for your ring gap. If you put rings in it, they gave you they'll give you a list of what gap to put in for an NA motor, for a blower motor, for a turbo motor, for a nitrous motor. Is trying to upgrade a must with boost on stock internals? No, it's not a must. We normally do it because the motors that we're putting them on are usually really high mileage, and they probably could use that. Mr. Z, you have 11 Datsuns. That's a lot. The LS6 intake handles boost very well. Is there a limit to how much power you can make with a TBI 350? The problem is the intake, the induction system, the throttle body unit itself doesn't flow very much fuel, nor does it flow very much air. You can put the big block stuff on and that helps, but ultimately it just can't support the kind of power levels that 8 injectors will do of essentially unlimited capacity. You can put any kind of injector in there that you want. Would it be better to put a 4-barrel on it? Certainly, you'll pick up a lot of power going from the TBI to a 4-barrel. Possibly as purchase the heads assembled, is going to run a 617, 615 lift cam. However, step down cam size to a Truck Norris cam because of the info on Summit's page. I mean, you can measure that and see. I might be able to answer that tomorrow morning. I can get a hold of Brian and ask him if he remembers if the what those things are set up for. And you should be able to find a cam that will make whatever cam you have with a similar duration that has less lift, that will still make the same power. I mean, if you put a 590 cam in or 595 cam instead of a 617, it's going to work fine. And quite honestly, if they tell you that it will go to 600, it probably will go to more than that, because they're going to tell you that the spring is good for 600, but they're going to have some leeway in there. Jeremy's game to port an L3 intake, but I'm down to one core, so I need to start looking for another one so I can port and send it to you. Nat, I can find one. I can find an LS3 intake manifold. Well, I say that, but I'm pretty sure. The cool thing is they also made an RB20, which is a 2-liter 6-cylinder. Isn't the turbos UR poles running in the same around 400 horsepower? I don't know what that is. RB25 turbo, better choice for the 240Z than the L28 turbo. Both of those would use the same single turbo. I would suspect that although I don't know, an RB25 NA might not make what the L28 does. The L28 is bigger. It doesn't have nearly as good as cylinder heads, but CA18DT versus a 7 MGTE shootout would be a cool video. Isn't the 7 MGTE, isn't that the pre 2J super motor? And the CA18 is a 4-cylinder, right? Do you have video of turbo and wastegate selections? I don't. GT25 was on the SR20 DET S13s. Same here till last summer when I switched to LS and then added twin turbos. That's good. Yeah, the 3M is a pre 2J super motor. Varies to T25. Thank you guys all for your support, by the way. Yeah. Yeah, the turbo that's on mine, I was told, don't try to get crazy with turning up, which we won't. We have bigger ones for it. Tim, hi everyone. I got tech. What is Thine's head gasket brands and size? For what application? What are you talking about? For first engine build, would it be a good idea to start off with the carburetor engine before the fuel injection? Yeah, it would. I mean, the build itself, the heads, the camshaft, the short block, all that stuff, if you're building it, all that's going to be the same. But getting it running would probably be easier with the carburetor. About to head to Georgia to get a German short hair pup. Oh, adorable. On Saturday, 14.5-hour drive. Nice. It's a good thing the new fuel pump runs like a champ. Nice. Breathe life into the new 4-point grate. RB in the long run will have more support and be more responsive and reliable. 2J parts are easier to get in the RB. I would say that a 2J has more aftermarket support in the United States than an RB, although we may see that change fairly soon because a lot of the RBs are running out of their useful life. I think we're going to start getting more of those here. Lorenzo, I think I answered your Ford versus Chevy question already. 351 Cleveland head gasket. Thin ones give low compression. Thin ones give you higher compression. A thin gasket does. A thicker gasket reduces compression. I have a stock internal LQ4 with a TSP 224. Which turbo would you recommend to get 650 horsepower? A GT45 probably was what I would do for that. I mean, there are lots of them that will do it, but that's a cheap one. Richard is an engine god that knows almost everything. That's why we're all here. There's lots of good guys here that know. We all know different things, which is what's great. I have a hard time getting people to understand that. I get comments all the time, naturally, from people that, for whatever reason, are angry, and their thing is that they want to show that they know more. Well, nobody in the world knows more than anybody else. What they don't understand is that because you can't quantify that, you don't know more, you know different. So my life went down one path and other people's life went down another path, and we always decided that during that path, by choice or predisposition, genetics, whatever, that we learn certain things. You can walk out on the street and point to anybody, and that person will know something that you don't know. I guarantee it. They made lots of things. They may know lots of things that you don't know. But does that mean that they know more than you? No, because you'll know things that they don't know. And so it's not a more or less thing. The more or less thing is a ego and insecurity thing. It has nothing to do with reality. Single GT45 would be fine for your 600 horsepower thing. Lots of Aussies run the RB stuff and can get stuff shipped a little easier nowadays. Yeah. 2J parts are easy to get because we have a ton of NA ones. Yeah. There are lots of them, and I do see those in wrecking yards. Actually, I don't ever see an RB, but lots of the NA 2Js or 1Js or whatever. L28 with polished valve cover and Weber's is good looking. That's what I used to have in my. I had a 260Z, and I had an L28 motor in it, and I had a polished valve cover and steel braided hoses, and I had side drafts on it, a header and stuff. It's all good. Yeah, you can make lots of power. I boosted more GE heads than I have GTE heads. You're probably not alone in that, honestly. I mean, because there's a big disparity in price between a real 2J from a Supra, which would be now probably ridiculous money. But if I just go to the wrecking yard and get one from a Lexus or something, they're cheap. And I'm sure that if you add boost to it, it's going to make good power. And if you port it and put cams in it, it's going to do even better like they do. Got a perfect RB25 build for you. 1000cc injectors, GTX 3076 turbo, Tomei 58. How much are those camshafts? Those cams are probably a lot. Best thing about what you know is that you've tested. I have done a lot of testing, but there's a difference between when I say I know something or somebody knows something. I'm talking about something that they know. Like we walk outside, we know the sky is blue. People can tell you it's red or green or yellow or whatever, but we know that the sky is blue. So I'm differentiating that from opinions, and I get a lot of those too. And people want to argue about that. And I'm like, look, I'm not going to bring all of this data and show you there's also all sorts of knuckleheads out there that are like, Richard doesn't know anything about cams. He's not a real cam guy. And I've been doing this for 5 years or 10 years or whatever. And I'm a cam expert and I know about valve events and and I drag race and I do all these things. And so they list off all these things. But what they haven't done is any testing. And so they'll give you opinions about, well, you don't know anything about turbo cams. So I'm like, no, actually, I really do. What I can tell you is that I've run hundreds of cams. And what I always ask is my first question to people like this is like, okay, well, can you at least go to any manufacturer or yourself, if you make cams, if you're the cam guy, if you're the cam expert, can you show me a cam, any cam that I can't run with boost? So that's my challenge to all of the knuckleheads out there. All of you people that are complaining, can you show me a camshaft that I can't run with boost? Is there such a thing? So let's say, because nobody's been able to do it yet, but let's say somebody was able to do that. Let's say for whatever reason, it was some weird, asymmetrical thing or something, something weird. So that I could guarantee you this though, I've never seen one that if it runs, if it starts up, it runs, it makes power and it runs NA. I've never seen a camshaft yet that you can't put a turbo on. So let's say somebody found one for whatever reason, but I can find 10,000 that do. So if I say every cam's a turbo cam, we find out that 10,000 of them do and one of them doesn't. I think I'm pretty safe in saying that. Do you think the technology in the LT engines are superior to the LS-based engine? The technology is definitely much higher on an LT. It's the next generation of engines. An LS doesn't have direct injection. An LT does. So it does have more technology. On a 6-liter sloppy stage 2 with force performance 8088 turbo, what size injector should I run? And are there any brands that you recommend? How much power are you trying to make? So if you give me a power number, because the injector size is based on whatever power output is. I'm not sure what that 8088 is going to make. Let's say it makes 1200. So you need enough injector for 1200. So whatever that is. And if you need it for 1200 on E85, you need even more. So like an 80-pound injector is not going to work for if you want to max that thing out on E85. You're going to need at least 1,000 cc's, and I think more like between 12 and 1,500. Can you limit lift to 525, 550, but run a larger duration number for increased cylinder filling and exhaust flow? Well, you're making a mistake there by thinking that you're substituting one thing for the other. They honestly do different things. So what you should look at is all of the cam tests that I have, and I have some that are low lift cams. And if you take a low lift cam and you add duration to it, it's going to change the RPM where the thing wants to make peak power. That's kind of what duration does. You can juggle that with magic valve events a little bit, but basically a 200-degree cam is not going to make peak power as high of an RPM as a 220 or 230-degree cam. So the fact that you have higher or lower lift, you're not going to substitute one thing for the other. Because in my opinion, lift has less of an effect than duration does. Although I also don't like I just did, when people try to isolate individual cam things. Like what does just LSA do? What does just lift do? What does just duration do? Well, they all work together. That's why I like to run the cams and show you what the cam does and give you a power curve NA. And then from that NA power curve, you can extrapolate anything else. What happens if I run 100 shot of nitrous? Well, if you're making 400 horsepower like this cam did, and you run 100 shot of nitrous, guess what's going to happen? You're going to make 500 because that's what nitrous does. It does it to that cam and every other cam exactly the same. Same thing with boost. If you run a 400 horsepower motor and you run 1 bar and you have everything right, should make 800. At what point is it better for me to buy a trick flow heads rather than doing a port and polish on my stock heads? The The reason that you would do an aftermarket set of heads really is the deck thickness of the deck. The aftermarket cylinder heads have much thicker decks than factory ones do. So if you're trying to run lots and lots of power and lots of cylinder pressure, having a thicker deck always better. They could ultimately, a lot of those, if you look at the cam or at the head test that I've done, an aftermarket head like a 225 trick flow head and a ported set of 243 or 799 heads might make the same power, but one of them has a much thicker deck. With Jet Card 5.3, then putting an SN95, looking at running between 6 and 800 horsepower, big range there, boosted, but I'm staying manual. What cam do you suggest for drivability? A hot rod cam would be bigger than I would put in there. I'd put a much smaller camshaft in there. If you're running it boosted, I'd put a small cam in it. A 5.3 would be a Truck Norris cam and not a hot rod cam, unless you want the chop. Is there a formula for calculating dynamic versus static compression on LS? There is a formula for calculating dynamic compression for any motor. Take a look up on Wallace Racing's website. But please note that dynamic compression doesn't tell you everything that you need to know about a motor or its susceptibility to detonation or any of that. If I run turn a 5.3 into a 383, what size turbo would you use in injectors? The injector size is the same no matter what the displacement of the motor is. It's all a function of the power output. You have to have enough injector to feed the power, regardless of what the motor size is. The turbo thing, again, you pick the turbo for whatever power output you want to make. If you pick a 1,000 horsepower turbo, you can run that on a 4.8, a 5.3, or a 383. And the bigger motors are just going to be more responsive. Ultimately, the power is going to be the same. What's up with the cam on the bookshelf behind you? One of them is damaged. The other one is a solid roller cam, I think. Like my exhaust note to sound like a Gen 1 small block Chevy. Just change the firing order. My buddy runs a turbo cam as NA53 in his truck and says they work good for a street engine. The people need to stop thinking about them as turbo cams. They're just cams. So if you have a stock cam and you put a stage 1 or a stage 2 turbo cam, that's a much bigger than stock cam, and it will most definitely make more power than a stock cam. What it's probably going to do, like on a stage 2, is it is definitely going to lose power down low because it's a big cam. A stage 2 cam is, I think, a 226 cam. It's a pretty good sized cam. Same thing with a sloppy stage 2, although a sloppy stage 2 is trending more toward a single pattern cam, so it helps bring up some of the low speed power. You want to run 1,500 horsepower on a 383? So yeah, you're going to run 1,500 cc injectors. Richard, would that require a different crank and cam profile for what? Shadow Ops. I don't remember what I said. I don't remember what I answered. Oh, I don't know. No, it doesn't require a different crank because we can change the firing order in the cams. You could do it, just do a 4/7 swap on it. And I wouldn't recommend, if you're going to try to make 1,500 horsepower, I wouldn't recommend doing a 383. I'd recommend using a 6-liter like we did on the Big Bang motor, or staying with a 5.3. Would a BTR Stage 4 truck cam be a good choice for an LY7? I don't think it would be. So I'm going to go ahead and close out our poll at 70%, saying, is the RB a better choice for the 240Z than the L28? More guys like the twin cam motor. Interesting. Johnson, is there a big difference in air to air versus air to water? Lucky for you, I have a video up that goes over a direct comparison between those two. One more minute. Time to go. Time to go, 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 go. Time to go, 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 go. Usually the choice between an air to air and air to water is the application, what you're trying to do with it. Mine isn't the Neo, and actually I was told not to get the Neo. Trying to remember why. I thought that the turbo would be damaged or something. Let's see. Nissan RB engine. So there was a 24. 26 ET. 28 stroker version. Where's our 25 at? 25. I'll have to see what year mine is. So the non-Neo one is 8.5 to 1, makes less power. The Neo one is 9 to 1. Both have T3 turbos, 45 V3 with the OP6 compressor. I thought one of them had a ceramic wheel or something weird. The Neo had solid lifters. I thought that there was a change. Revised camshafts with an on-off solenoid variable VCT. Use a hotter thermostat, special coil packs, revised intake manifold. Oh, that's right. They reduced the inlet side. The runner diameter is reduced from 50 to 45 millimeters to increase air velocity and low-end torque. That's why that people were saying not to use that. Combustion chamber head is so small. Is smaller, so model-specific pistons are used to compensate. The turbo received a larger OMP6 turbine, which came with steel compressor and turbine wheels. Coolio stuff. Yeah, hit the like button. Richard, ball bearing or journal bearing for my T-type? I've run both, and I haven't seen a big difference. Normally, we just run journal bearings on stuff. Do intercoolers deteriorate quickly? I've run mine for years and years and years, but like electrolysis and buildup stuff is definitely something to look for. Daniel, thanks. I wonder when the 3.6 liter LS will be running. I don't think it's going to. I heard it at MPMC that that's not actually going to happen. What's the maximum horsepower for the aluminum block 5.3? Like 1,500. So there's no limit. Does 14.7 pounds of boost, yours will be the last one, equate to effectively doubling an engine's displacement? No, it doesn't double the displacement, because the displacement doesn't determine power output. It doesn't just determine the processing efficiency of the motor. What it does is it doubles the power output, not the displacement. And on that note, it is time to go. Thank you guys all for showing up as usual. So now we're going to start doing twice a day at least. And I'm also working on other videos that I'm going to get up here as quickly as I can and get some of the 10 or 12 minute ones up on the LS and on the 2.2, some flow data. I got some interviews going on. Lots of cool stuff, man. Thank you guys all for showing up, and I will be back. I'll be back.